Hello, and welcome to the Fertility Conversations podcast. The goal of this podcast is to create more awareness about infertility and to provide support to people trying to conceive. Thank you for listening today, and we hope you will be encouraged. And now, here is your host, Ola.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Fertility Conversations. Today, I'm joined by a lovely guest, Narelle from Australia. She's the author of the newly released book, Baby Dream, and will be sharing her infertility journey with us today. Her details would also be in the show notes. So welcome, Narelle, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Yay, thank you. And to start off, we usually say, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name's Narelle Hudson. I live in Brisbane in Australia, and I'm 42 years old. I live with my husband, and I have my own counselling practice and natural healing practice, where I work with people around grief, around infertility, mental health, relationships, a whole range of different areas to help them with their healing and support them. And I'm also an author as well.
Oh, that's wonderful. And with your work in the counseling, did that start from your own journey, or is that always something you did?
No, it definitely was a byproduct of my experiences with infertility. When I started my infertility journey, I was actually an early childhood teacher. And yeah, it was really hard to continue in that profession when I was going through all my rounds of IVF and struggling to conceive. So I kind of got pushed out of that for a few different reasons. There were also like some politics behind it as well. But yes, obviously because of the emotional journey I was on, it was hard to work with little kids every day.
Yeah.
And then later I studied counselling.
And it's great to have you in the counselling space, right? Because lots of people do need counselling throughout the journey for different reasons. So it's great to have you able to support people.
Yes, very much. I think it's such an isolating time when people are going through infertility problems, and when they even lose babies, it's such a difficult time. I know when I was going through my journey, I couldn't even find a counsellor who really understood it. Like, you really need someone who actually understands. It's such a niche kind of area as well.
Yeah. So this is a good time to, get into your journey. If you could please tell us a little bit about your journey so far.
Yeah, of course. So I guess my journey started when I was really young. Like with most women, we're kind of in a society where everyone expects us to have children because we're women, and that's what women do. And so my journey started when I was very young. Even my mum, from an early age, was always talking about when she had grandchildren, and then we'd do this and we'd do that. And she was buying baby clothes for me when I was like 12.
Oh, wow.
It was always expected that I would go down that path. And so I was looking for the perfect person, the perfect man in my case, so that I could have that family and have that fairy tale with someone. And then I finished my teaching degree, and I met my husband in my first year out of uni when I must have been about 24. And yes, we just kind of hit it off, but he had already had children. He had 3 of his own from a previous marriage. He was a little bit older than I. And after he'd had his 3 children with his wife at the time, they had decided that they wouldn't have any more children. And of course, he never knew it would end and he would meet me. So he had had a vasectomy. So from the get-go, there were obviously some pretty solid signs that it was going to be a bit more challenging. And at first I thought, oh, well, you know, I'm young and I'm normal and fertile. I think, you know, it'll be easy for me to conceive. So at first there was a lot of blame there around, you know, why did I pick this person that's going to make my journey more difficult?
Right.
But, yeah, but we got through that, and we ended up realizing that IVF was our only path moving forward. And that was a grief in itself, just accepting that I wasn't going to have a baby the natural way.
Right.
I've always been a natural person. I don't have chemicals. I'm a vegan. Like, I always do really healthy things for my body. And yes, it was quite a shock to know that I was only going to conceive if I went through all of the hormones and injections and needles and everything that journey consists of.
Right.
And then when we went into IVF, you get over that sort of grief, and then you think, oh, it'll be easy, it'll work, because, you know, I'm young and I'm thin, and, you know, I don't have any fertility problems of my own, so I should be fine. And we went through 4 cycles, and it just kept going, like the emotional and financial upheaval of it all. It's just such a roller coaster ride of constant grief and loss as you keep losing every cycle, and potentially that egg that was meant to be the baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the doctors didn't even know what was going wrong. They're like, well, this is unusual. I became a bit of a guinea pig, I think, for them, because they're like, well, why has this not worked in 4 rounds? And then, yeah, that's another long story on its own, but they had been actually putting the eggs in the wrong spot and not in my uterus.
Really?
So that's why I didn't fall pregnant.
How is that possible?
I have a very interesting body. I have like maybe too much information. I have a bicornuate uterus, which is like a double uterus.
Right, okay.
And so they couldn't actually put the eggs back in my uterus without doing it under surgery.
Oh.
So the 5th time they finally had worked out what was going on, they'd done another operation, a hysteroscopy, just so that they could find out what was going on and what was going wrong. And then they put the 5th lot of eggs back into my uterus under surgery, and I fell pregnant. And we thought, oh, this is it. You know, they finally solved the puzzle. I'm pregnant. Everything's going to be fine. And it was. I had a really healthy pregnancy until I got to 23 weeks. And then I started getting pains in my back, which I definitely didn't know at the time were early signs of contractions. And ended up at the hospital, and there was nothing they could really do. I was already dilated by the time I got to the hospital, and my son was born naturally 30 minutes later. And yeah, beautiful River, we called him. And he was perfect. He was just too young. His lungs weren't developed properly, and the hospital were kind of panicked, I think, because they didn't know what to do, and they didn't have anything to support him. My husband was like, well, where's the humidity crib? What are you doing? And they're like, well, there's nothing we can do. So we just held him until he passed away.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, thank you. So it was lovely that we got to spend that time with him, but yeah, obviously months and years of grief come after that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And doctors were already talking the next day about how we would replace him and how I would get pregnant again. And my husband and I were already exhausted by that stage. And I think our marriage would have probably had problems if we kept going.
Right.
Just because it had been such an emotional and financial investment. And we were really strong, but yeah, there's only so much you can cope with, isn't there? So we decided to make the really hard decision not to try again. Yeah. hence the title of my book, which is The
Oh,
Baby Dream.
Baby Dream. Yes. So that was the inspiration for your book, Baby Dream.
Yes, very much. It started off, I just wrote it for myself because I've always been a writer and that's how I process things and heal.
Mm.
And so I wrote it for myself selfishly to start with, I guess. But yeah, but then through my journey, I realized it needed to be out there for other people to read because as a counselor, I know that we don't talk about these things. And that's why, you know, podcasts like yours are so amazing. We're actually talking about these taboo topics that no one really wants to talk about or hear about.
Yeah, and we need to talk about it because people are dealing with it, right? And people feel more alone because they're not talking about it. They don't realize that other people have perhaps dealt with something similar. So it's so important to have these conversations and to have books like yours, right? Because someone else reads it and says, oh, okay, Narelle is out there. She knows what I'm feeling. I can reach out to her. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just my story, but I think it connects with other people in terms of there's common themes that we go through in grief and infertility journeys that they can relate to. And as you said, then they don't feel so alone. They feel like someone else kind of gets what they're going through.
Yeah. And currently for that book, it's available on Amazon Australia. I know you mentioned, and that shortly, hopefully soon, it will be available elsewhere in other Amazons, right?
Yes, definitely. It's available in Australia on my website, which is narellehudson.com, and on Booktopia and Amazon Australia, and my publisher's website, Animal Dreaming Publishing. But yes, it's yet to sort of make it overseas, I think, because of the COVID restrictions. They're just not putting it up until they actually physically have my book in their hands because postage is taking a bit longer at the moment. But it's on the way.
Okay, yes. It's going to come to us shortly. And during that whole time, you know, when you were going through your journey, and how did you find support? Was there any support available for you?
I think unlike other women that I've spoken to, my best support was my husband. I know women often say that their men don't get it or they don't understand. And in lots of ways, of course, my husband couldn't understand because it's my body and you go through it in different ways and feel different griefs, even though you're going through something similar. But yeah, he was just my rock. He was so supportive. I get emotional just talking about it because he's just, been there the whole time. And I couldn't have done it without him.
And that's so important, right? Because both of you probably just rely on each other because you both have experienced it. You're both there, seeing everything day to day, seeing what you're going through, like you said, through the full IVF cycles, through all of it. You're both there.
Yeah, and we kind of had to rely on each other because we were living in a small country town and we were far away from family and friends, and it kind of was just us at the time. And I reached out and tried to find books and couldn't even find anything written by a woman at the time. I found something written by a man, but of course it didn't really connect with me. And I didn't really feel like there was much emotional support through the IVF clinics. It seemed very sterile and, very technical and medical and scientific, but it didn't seem to be on that emotional level of, getting what you're going through.
Yeah, because they just do their part, right? Like, okay, this is a cycle, do the transfer, okay, see ya. And then you have to somehow find a way to navigate the rest of it by yourself or with a support group. So
yeah, definitely, because I remember getting through 3 or 4 rounds of IVF and being in tears in the specialist office, and she was just like, passed me a box of tissues and said, do you want to quit? And I'm like, oh no, I don't want to quit, but I need more than just that.
Exactly.
Do you want to quit? Yeah.
Yeah, I think they need to be more understanding. I guess it's hard for them because I don't know, because they see so many people and it's just like, oh, okay, what do you want to do? But somehow I think they need to find a way to merge the support. It's either within the clinic or at least through a referral for their patients, so people know there's another place for this kind of support that I need.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, and as you said, it's not her fault. I'm sure she saw 20, 30, 40 people a day, and yeah, she's trying to protect herself as well. But,
yeah. And I like how, you mentioned earlier that, your husband and yourself considered the impact of any future cycles on your relationship. And of course, infertility does plays a huge role on relationships. Sometimes it can pull people apart. Sometimes it can draw them closer. So how would you say, of course, I know that you relied on each other, but in your relationship, how would you say that, what was the impact of infertility on you both?
Yeah, I definitely think in our instance, it pulled us closer together and made us really, really strong united front where, as you said, often you find that couples do separate, especially after they lose a child. Like it's a very difficult path to navigate because every human grieves differently, and often you can kind of feel isolated even when you're grieving together because both of you are doing it differently and you don't necessarily understand how the other person's grieving, or you don't think they're doing it the right way.
They're not doing it right, yeah.
But there is no right or wrong way to do it. And yeah, I think it's about just that acceptance, which is really powerful, just accepting that everyone's doing the best they can, even though it is hard and there are no rules that come with that. There's no manual, is there?
No. Well said. Thank you for sharing that, Narelle. And, of course, you noted earlier as well that infertility, baby loss is such a taboo subject. And when you were going through different stages in your cycles as well, you couldn't really find anyone that was really addressing that from the female perspective. Why have you decided to speak out and share your story, considering that it is highly stigmatized and still so much taboo attached to it?
Because it's so important for us to talk about it. It really is. And also because I'm very spiritual, and my son talks to me and I connect with him in spirit. And he's been plaguing me for nearly 11 years, which is how long he's been passed away, to share our story, Mummy. He says, share our story.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm guided by spirit to share it, as well as know logically that it's important to share it. It just took me this long because I'm human, and I obviously had to go through all the grief, and not go through it in terms of get out the other side, because I don't believe we ever get over it, but to be in a place where I can share with other people without still being in the trenches myself. Yeah.
I wonder if it's okay for you to tell me a little bit more about that. I'm not sure, because when you said that you communicate with your son and he speaks to you to share, do you mind sharing more about that? Because I think for people that might be spiritual, unspiritual, but I would just like to know more if you're willing to share that aspect as well.
Yeah, of course. So for me, spirituality encompasses many things. I think that was part of my support when I was going through infertility as well. I often, I was running a natural therapy business at the time, and so I am a Reiki master, and I do crystal healings and different spiritual healing practices with energy, and that helped me with my healing. And I think part of that spirituality for lots of us, if we're open, is to have that clairvoyance or clairsentience to be able to connect with spirit as well. And not everyone, hears their voice or sees them. Obviously, clairvoyance is where you see spirit, and I don't do that. I don't see spirit, but I have what's called clairsentience, where I just have a knowing, like I just know things that I wouldn't know if I was thinking logically, things that I couldn't know. And after I lost River, I also did connect with psychic mediums who actually did bring my son through and relay messages from him to me as well, just so I could have that connection with him as well. And I think, sometimes that happens more subtly for people as well. They get little signs or something. People tell me that they, see feathers, or they, see coins or butterflies or something, birds, just little signs that remind them, or that, show them that that person's around, even though they're not on the earth anymore.
Yeah. And that must
Does
be
that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I think that must provide, nothing can take away the pain or the grief, but I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, if that will bring some kind of comfort when your baby says to you, for you to share your story and to let people know, just to see how he's feeling about, or excited about you sharing the story. Does that bring some kind of comfort for you?
Yes, I think so. As you said, the grief doesn't diminish, but it does bring, I guess, that connection that, you still have a relationship with that person, even though they're not here. And in counselling terms, we call that continuing bonds. You still have that relationship with the person through the memories that you've shared with them when they were here. And obviously I don't have that many memories of when he was here, because he was only with me for 23 weeks in my tummy and 45 minutes in physical form. So there are less memories, but we still have that continuing bond, which I think is definitely comforting to people to know that, that connection is still there.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that, Narelle, and for going into more details. I think that it will be very helpful for people that are also exploring the spiritual aspects of their journey. So thank you.
That's okay.
And now, of course, we have the book out. And so, people can read your story and keep sharing and learn from it, and also be inspired by it. So thank you for choosing to write that from your experience and helping other women and men around the world.
Yes, thank you. I think it's important that we acknowledge men too, because I think we do often target these things at women, but it can also be helpful for men who don't understand what their partner's going through and want to be there to support them the best way they can.
Yes, definitely. We need more men in this conversation, because, especially even with infertility, with loss, they are also experiencing their own grief and, pain. It might be different, or they might express it differently, like you noted earlier, but they also need support. So thank you for acknowledging that as well. And so, Narelle, if there was any quote or word of affirmation that you have found helpful during your journey, would you like to share any with us?
Yes, I love the one by Brené Brown. I think she's inspirational.
She's amazing.
And my favorite quote of hers is, "One day you will tell your story of how you overcame what you went through, and it will be someone else's survival guide."
Yes, that's perfect. And that's what Baby Dream is, isn't it? And even you sharing your story, yes. You never know who needs to read it, who needs to hear, and, who would be so inspired and encouraged and helped by hearing your story. So thank you for helping to break the taboo and break the stigma and standing out to share your story. Thank you, Narelle.
Thank you. And you do that too, so thank you.
Yeah. And knowing what you know now, what would you tell, I don't know, 18-year-old Narelle, if you could go back in time?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. Just to, I guess, be more kind to yourself, and that it's enough just to be you. You don't have to be anything that society says you need to be.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
That's so
we
important.
put a lot of pressure on ourselves, don't we, to be a mother or have a career or have a house, or like we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to meet society's expectations, I think.
Yeah, and when you don't meet it, you start to question yourself and blame yourself and compare yourself with other people. But everyone's different. Everyone's journey is different. Everyone's path is different. But every single one of them matters, all our stories, and every single one of them is beautiful.
Well
even
said.
though, yeah. So thank you. We need to definitely be kinder to ourselves. And as a wrap up, Narelle, are there any words of encouragement for any individual or couple currently dealing with infertility? What would you say to them?
That just be really kind to yourself, because it's a roller coaster ride. There are the ups and the downs, and it's hard. It's not an easy journey. So yeah, just be really patient with yourself and surround yourself by people who can just hold space for you and just listen.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to, separate or give yourself a bit of space from the people who just can't get it, even if they're trying. Because initially I thought those people just didn't care because they didn't understand. But in retrospect, I know that they really did care. It was just really hard for them to sit by and watch you in pain and not be able to do anything.
Exactly.
But sometimes they're not the right people to have around when you need someone who does understand. Yeah.
Well said, Narelle. And if there's anyone listening as well that wants to reach out to you for support or for counseling, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, so my website is narellehudson.com. And yes, I do telehealth as well, so I can do online counselling and telephone counselling as well. And my book's on the website as well. That's
perfect. So that means anywhere around the world you can still support people. They don't have to be in Australia.
Yes. Yeah, I think there are different insurance policies with some areas in America for counselling, but yeah, can definitely support people overseas in some areas as well.
Perfect.
Or we can work out postage to get you your book before it gets to Amazon.
I know, right? That's an option, exactly. That's an option, exactly. If Amazon, the rest of the world is taking too long, we'll just ship it out and get the books. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Narelle. It's been amazing having you on here today. Thank you so much for sharing your story, for writing your book and inspiring us all around the world, for choosing to challenge the status quo of keeping quiet and breaking the stigma around infertility and baby loss, for sharing your story of baby Riva with us today. So thank you. And, for also enlightening us about the spiritual aspect of grief and how that can also help people that are willing to explore that option as well. So thank you so much, Narelle.
Thank you, Ola.
It's been amazing having you on here. And I know that lots of people are going to be inspired by your story and encouraged. And it's been a pleasure having you on here, and I look forward to having you again in the near future.
Lovely. I'd love that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Fertility Conversations podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give us a 5-star rating and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram at Fertility Conversations. If there are any topics you would like to have discussed, please send an email to fertilityconversations@gmail.com. Be sure to tune in next week for our next episode. Thank you again for listening. Take care of yourself and do stay hopeful.